Nama, 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 namaste. Welcome back, Stellar Stargazers, and a warm cosmic hello to our new listeners. I'm Sophie.
And I'm Heather, and you're tuning into the Stellar Soulcast,
where we decode the cosmos one episode at a time.
And in our last episode, we reviewed the planetary bodies, not how we learned them in school during science class, but how they're expressed here in astrology.
But in today's episode, we are going to do a fun introductory segment on ancient roots of modern Western astrology, where we will focus on ancient cultures of Babylon, Egypt, Greece, and Rome. We would like to introduce astrology not as a new age invention, but as an ancient system forged through a deep desire to understand the will of the gods. So, Heather, did you want to start us off with Babylon?
Sure. Babylon was located between the Tigris and Euphrates River, but specifically nestled right alongside the Euphrates, which is now located in present-day Iraq. Now that we have a little location of where it is, let's open our journey as we pretend to be under the skies of ancient Mesopotamia in the beautiful city of Babylon. Here, the night sky wasn't just a canvas of stars, it was the voice of the gods. So, in the Babylonian culture, astrology was both a sacred ritual as well as a practical science, and it was tightly woven into the political and religious fabric of their society. Within this segment, we're going to introduce how astrology began as a tool for divine insight in social order. So, Babylonian astrology was at a state level. It wasn't originally used for personal guidance, how we do it today, but it was to interpret omens for their kings, their armies, harvest seasons, and national fate. They had priests. They were called, I might butcher this, but I think Chaldeans?
Yeah.
So they served as both astronomers as well as their diviners. So they would build these temples. They were kind of like pyramid-based called ziggurats, and the pyramid was used so it was close to the gods.
Right. And that's so interesting because I remember this from middle school.
Yeah, right? It was funny because
the ziggurats stand out to me. I wonder, how about with our listeners? Do you guys remember that? I'm curious to know.
Right? Ziggurats. It's funny because it's a fun name to say it too.
That's
I like it. Ziggurats. One thing that was super important is that the Babylonians believed that the celestial movements were the writings of the gods, okay? So, especially from their most important gods, their sky god Anu, Enlil, which was the god of air, and Ea, and that's the god of wisdom and water. So since they believed it was the writing of their gods, they interpreted these writings as divine messages, okay? Or omens that could foretell everything from war and famine to royal successions and even weather patterns. So the priests, they were the ones that recorded these omens and they matched them to real world events. And what I really, really do want to stress here is that this practice wasn't just spiritual, but it was a political tool. So the political tool was used, like I said a little while ago, guide the kings. They wanted to ensure that the state aligned with the cosmos. So very, very interesting.
Yeah, I could see how maybe political figures would be very interested in that because they're like, what's going to happen with the next race or the next,
because I think it's
cultural
still,
event
used here in modern society.
Oh boy.
But
maybe.
Yeah. But let's talk a little bit about the priests who recorded these texts. So the omens that we were just speaking about, they were recorded on tablets, like cuneiform tablets, which were called the Enuma Anu Enlil. And this recording had over 7,000 celestial omens.
Wow.
Right? Like, imagine these all in little tablets.
And when you think about how, far back in the past that was, like, did not have all the information, as accessible as we have it now. So all of those, recordings probably.
So cool. It's so. I actually think I don't
centered.
know. I can't don't quote me on this, stargazers. But drop a comment if I'm incorrect here. I think some of them survived due to a fire. Whoa. Yeah, because they were clay. So they were like clay tablets.
So they
I think like something had happened during a raid or something, and they actually got preserved from that. I could be wrong. I don't
Yeah.
know. I'm not, it's been a very long time, but I
Yeah.
think that's what I remember it.
And when we get to ancient Egypt, I do want to go back to this. So remind me.
You got it. So these 7,000 celestial omens describe the meaning of planetary and lunar events. These omens were based on centuries, guys, just put that there, of sky watching and record keeping, forming a complex system of cause and effect, kind of like a cosmic legal code from the gods.
Wow, that's interesting. And I can see how even with astrology as we know it today, like modern astrology, a lot of it is so similar, where all these recordings of planetary movements and how it could influence our, day to day or life events and stuff like that, and how, just the influence.
Those cosmic energies.
Yeah, the cosmic energy.
That's why I say I love to use the word frequencies.
Oh, yeah.
That's my favorite.
Yeah.
It's like the energies and the frequencies. I love it. But moving on, we're going to talk a little bit about one of their star catalogs called the Mole Apin. A little fun thing, mole, if I'm pronouncing it correctly, actually translates into star or constellation. So it's literally called the star catalog. So the Babylonian astrology was also deeply mathematical, which was recorded in the Mole Apin. One of their greatest intellectual achievements within this writing documented fixed stars, planetary paths, sunrise, sunset, all of those points, and also seasonal alignments. The catalog listed stars by their position along with the paths of, again, their gods, so Anil, Anu, and A, and it divided the sky within those three gods as the northern, central, and southern zones. So it also detailed lunar calendars, the solstice, equinox, and heliacal risings. It was not just observational, it was predictive. So that's one thing we want to stress. They knew what they were looking for, in a way. Like I said, omens. And it's, as Sophie just said, we kind of do that a little bit today. We might not use the omen aspect or the coding of or the word of omen.
Right.
But we know what's predictable. Right. So the Babylonian astrologers could calculate their future planetary positions, enabling the shift from general omens to personalized horoscope, which kind of went into later centuries. But I just want to stress here, which is really cool, and one of the groundbreaking foundation of the Babylonian astrology is that they are actually credited for creating the 12-sign zodiac. So, one of Babylon's most enduring contributions for this was they divided the sky into 12 equal 30-degree sections along the elliptical. So very similar to how it's divided today in our natal chart. But we'll get back to that. They did not have natal charts, but just putting that little correlation out there. So the zodiac system helped track the moon and the planets through fixed star fields, providing a consistent celestial map that later cultures, including the Greeks and the Romans, which we will mention shortly, would adopt and refine. The zodiac also reflected agricultural and religious cycles. So, for instance, the constellation Taurus, as we know it today, Taurus, signaled spring planting, and Scorpio, which they didn't call it Scorpio, we'll get into that in a second, marked the season of the dying and the descent, so fall. Right, so spring and fall. Each segment was associated with a constellation, and many of which have familiar names today, like I just said. So I just want to briefly mention, because I thought this was super cool, how it correlates to the zodiac as we know it. I am not going to try to pronounce the Babylonian names here. I will totally butcher it. I'm going to do their English translation. So I'm going to start now with the hired laborer, or the man, which, I'm sure you guys guessed it, is Aries. Remember in our past episodes, Aries kicks off the zodiac, right? They named it the hired man, the hired laborer or man. Going into the heavenly bull, Taurus. They had the great twins, Gemini. The crab, or some might say the turtle, because it was loosely translated as the scurrier or the barrier. But back then, it was, there's context on that. There's like a little bit of back and forth of what it really was. I thought that was just cool to mention. But the crab, Cancer. They had the lion, Leo, the seed, Pharaoh, or the maiden, Virgo, the scales, Libra, the scorpion, as we know it today, Scorpio. They had the archer for their god, Pabelsag, totally butchering that, but that would be Sagittarius. They had the goatfish, Capricorn, the great one, or their water bearer, which is today, Aquarius, and they had the tails, their fish, so Pisces. And then moving on, they also did planet god associations as well as we know it today. So moving from the constellations, let's quickly go over the planets with their deity associations. So the sun was Shamash, which their domain was for justice, truth, and illumination. They knew of the planetary body of the moon, obviously, so that was called Sin. It was time, fertility, and associated with the underworld. Mercury was called Nabu, wisdom, writing, communication. Seeing the correlations here, guys. And then Venus was Ishtar, and that was their deity for love, beauty, war, fertility. Mars was called Nagal for war, plague, destruction. Jupiter was called Marduk, and that was kinship, order, divine authority. I just thought I would do a little fun fact. That was their most important god. And then they knew of Saturn, okay? And the deity for that was called Ninurata or Ninib. And the domain was for agriculture, judgment, and discipline. So these associations weren't symbolic in the abstract sense. They were actually their embodied truths. So they really, truly believed that these were their gods up in the skies and giving them guidance. So, for example, Venus was actually Ishtar herself rising and descending, which was often linked to their fertility power and renewal. Also, I just want to stress here that we did leave out Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto, and this is because the Babylonians did not know of them. They were discovered later with technological innovations. All right, so I just want to quickly wrap up here for this segment of the Babylonians and stress what bedrock they left for us in Western astrology. So their system gave us the 12 signs of the zodiac. They embedded planetary rulerships in divine mythology. They established the connection between the celestial motion and earthly life, right? And they also inspired the Greek and Roman systems that followed, which we're going to get into in a little bit here. So, like I said, my brief little introduction on the influence of the Babylonian roots of Hellenistic astrology, which helped really essentially kick off the groundwork of Western astrology. And I don't know, you have any thoughts on that, Sophie?
I mean, overall, it's so cool to see how it developed and how we've gotten to modern day astrology with the 12 zodiac signs and looking through societies and civilizations from the past, how even the basic parts of day-to-day life and a society as a whole, how the planets and stars and everything, a connection can be made.
Absolutely, and it's so cool, too, because this is thousands of years ago, guys.
Yeah.
Thousands. This is all BCE.
Exactly.
And there are some roots that we didn't get into it in this episode. We can stress it's even older than this, where they got it from Sumerian, right? Because it's all in the same area.
Exactly.
So it's really cool. But going forward, I'm going to pass the spotlight on to Sophie, and she's going to give us some historical context of the influence of ancient Greece on modern day astrology.
Yes, perfect. So, okay, stargazers, I'm excited for this next segment because we are going to briefly explore not just how the ancient Greeks inherited Babylonian astrology, but how they transformed it. As some of you may be aware, The Greeks had a culture heavily influenced by philosophy, mathematics, and mythology. These influences are what helped them add a new depth to astrology by turning it into a system for self-exploration and not just a method for statecraft or omen reading. To put it simply, Greek astrology was the bridge between cosmic mechanics and inner meaning, whereas Babylonian astrology focused on divine order and state omens. Basically, the Greeks began to ask the question, what does the stars mean for me? Now that we know a little of the cultural perspectives of the Babylonian and Greeks, first, let's talk about how the Greeks got introduced to Babylonian astrology. And this happened after Alexander the Great's conquest of Babylon. Following the conquest, Greek astrologers gained access to Babylonian texts, which in turn got adapted into Greek culture. So, as Heather mentioned, the Babylonians had already divided the sky into 12 zodiac signs and linked visible planets to deities. The Greeks took the same concept and reimagined it into their own mythologies. Okay, so we'll take a look at those 12 zodiac signs. Heather went into to go over the translations because the the Babylonian signs themselves and ancient Babylonian language is hard to dictate.
For sure.
So we're just going to go over the translations and how they shifted, okay? So the hired laborer man, Aries, is linked to the golden ram of Phrixus, okay? Then Taurus, the heavenly bull, is linked to Zeus as a bull carrying Europa. The great twins, we know Gemini, is associated with Castor and Pollux, the Dioscuri. Okay, sorry if I'm butchering this a little bit. The crab, or some may argue the turtle, the Greek equivalent, and is associated with the crab Hera sent against Hercules. Leo, the lion, is associated with the myth Nemean, the lion, slain by Hercules. The seed fur maiden, Greek equivalent Virgo, associated with Demeter or Astera. The scales, Libra, of course, linked to the goddess of justice. Scorpio, linked to a creature that slays Orion. Now moving forward, the archer, Sagittarius, associated with Chiron, the centaur archer. Now the goatfish, of course, Capricorn, is linked to Pan's transformation. Now the great one, water bearer Aquarius, is associated with the myth of Ganymede, Zeus's cupbearer. Wow. And the tails fish, Pisces, associated with Aphrodite and Eris, fleeing as fish.
I don't think cute. I would have been would want to have been Zeus's cupbearer though.
Oh,
I don't know.
Get it right now,
right? And like with his spark,
I know.
He'd be like, oh, I don't like you.
Zap you,
zap me.
Oh boy.
Oh man.
But they also kept the same concept for the visibly known planets, but they renamed them for their own gods. So, with the sun, the Greek god Apollo, is associated with the domain truth, prophecy, and creativity. Now, the moon, Greek god Artemis / Selene, intuition, feminine rhythms. Aw, beautiful. I love it.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
I always love the name Artemis and Selene, right?
Yeah.
It's just, I don't know, it's so pretty.
Yeah. Has a nice, flow.
Yeah. I always wanted to name my cats that, get a white cat and a black cat.
Aw.
And, Artemis and Selene. I don't know.
That's very cute. Moving on, Mercury, the Greek god Hermes, associated with communication and intellect. Now, Venus, Greek god's name, Aphrodite, and the domain is love, beauty, and desire. Mars, Aries, the domain war, drive, and passion. Now, Jupiter, of course, the Greek god Zeus, we just mentioned him, Domain is authority, justice, and leadership. And lastly, Saturn, Chronos. Domain is time, structure, and legacy. So now that you'll notice that there's a few things. First, Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto are absent because, like the Babylonians, these planets were not yet discovered. Another is that planets are not the names as we know it today, and that is because they were renamed by Romans, which Heather will talk about in a few moments. Although the Greeks kept their foundation of the 12 zodiac and the planets, like I said a little while earlier, they switched astrology from state omens to the individual. And with that, we'll talk about the rise of horoscopic astrology. So, the Greeks introduced this concept of horoscopes, as they called it horoscopos, which translates to hour maker or watcher of the hour. This referred to the ascendant, the zodiac sign rising on the eastern horizon at the moment of a person's birth. The concept of horoscopus, which eventually gave birth to natal chart. As we have expressed, one's natal chart is the snapshot of the sky at the precise time and location of one's birth. Well, the horoscopus, or ascendant, just like in modern astrology, was the starting point of the development of the 12 astrological houses, or decans, which was influenced slightly by Egyptian astrology, which I will briefly touch on a little later in this episode. Each representing a different domain of life, such as identity, finance, communication, and home. And that is just to name a few. They also introduced planetary aspects to the natal chart.
So crazy, the similarities.
Yeah.
Right?
Another important thing that we can note is that the Greeks also infused astrology with natural philosophy through the 4 classical elements: fire, spirit, energy; earth, stability and matter; air, thought, communication; and water, emotion and intuition. Each zodiac sign was also assigned a modality: cardinal, being initiating; fixed, which is stabilizing; and mutable, adapting. This created a layered system where each sign had a ruling planet, an elemental nature, a modality. Hopefully that sounds
Very similar to what we've just been telling you stargazers about if you've been following each episode.
Right.
And if you haven't, go check it.
Exactly.
Episodes 2, 3, and 4.
Yes. Because we literally go through all of that.
Yes, we do.
And we're now telling you how we got to this point.
Mm-hmm. Circling around.
Yes.
The universe.
No,
circling around the universe.
Circling around the universe. Oh, yes. Right? On our little rocket ships. No, wait, stop. As we continue onward, one fun thing to mention is Ptolemy's Tetrabiblios became the ultimate Greek astrological manual, synthesizing Babylonian data, Egyptian symbolic time, and Greek philosophy. It is an important text which used scientific and philosophical reasoning to explain how stars and planets yield meaning for nearly 1,500 years. The Tetrabiblios also framed astrology as a rational art, elevating it alongside geometry and astrology.
Yeah, it's amazing.
Astronomy.
Yeah. Well, they kind of go hand in hand there a little bit.
They do.
Like you just said, it elevated it to almost a similar level instead of just a mythos, right?
Yeah.
Which I think is really cool. And 1,500 years, wow.
Mm-hmm. So to summarize, Greek astrology took the predictive backbone of Babylonian astrology and wrapped it in a rich tapestry of myth, logic, and self-exploration. By systematizing planetary influences and aligning them with psychological archetypes and natural laws, the Greeks built the blueprint for modern birth chart. This was the era where astrology became personal, a mirror of the cosmos within.
I think that's super cool. Because one of the things that I find really fascinating is how you see the timeline.
Yeah.
Right? The timeline of just how a cause and effect in a way. Babylonians, they put a foundation. Alexander the Great comes in, kind of conquers them, was smart enough to, I don't want to use necessarily the word assimilate, but be able to, I guess like assimilate the cultures together. And that's what made him able to morph their beliefs into Greek beliefs.
Right.
And then using that concept to essentially birth Greek astrology.
Yep.
It's really fascinating. And imagine if he didn't have that mind frame of
Exactly.
being, I don't want to use smart enough,
Curious.
but curious to
Right.
kind of take on the cultural aspects of those that he conquered.
Right. Because
Might not have this.
exactly. As it seems that they definitely tried to move away from that omen and using it for that predictive.
And it really is essentially almost exactly how we still
Use it
today.
Yeah, that's why I was like, so cool.
Yeah.
So cool. I hope you guys feel the same way. Okay, Heather, want to give us some information on Roman astrology? Sure.
Yeah, absolutely. So Roman astrology is super similar to Greek because by the time it really got to Rome, it was already shaped by the Babylonian precision and Greek philosophy. So the Romans didn't really reinvent astrology. They essentially popularized it. So they embedded it into the very heart of their imperial culture as well as their daily life. So they kind of took the two forms of it, right? So in Babylon, it was associated with the kings, and in Greek, it was very personalized. So they morphed it into one. But first thing I really do want to stress, though, is that the zodiac remained exactly the same. They didn't change any names that the Greek gave it. They just changed the names to Latinize the spelling of it. But they did change the planets, though. They put the planets to the names of their Roman equivalent gods, which essentially had the same exact meaning as the Greeks. So, we'll post a whole little diagram on this because it's fun to see it in a descriptive way for the three cultures. So essentially, I'll just go through it really quick because it is the names we know it today. So their celestial bodies, they knew of the sun, moon, Mercury, Venus, Mars, Jupiter, and Saturn. And that's all what the Romans called it. But I can just briefly say Mercury was also the messenger, traveler of commerce, right? So that's what they renamed it from Hermes. Venus is the deity for love and fertility and desire. That was what they renamed Aphrodite. Mars is associated with war, discipline, and valor, and they renamed Aries. And Jupiter is the god of law and expansion, right? So that's what they renamed Zeus. And Saturn was Chronos, time, agriculture, boundaries, and stayed all the way to today. But anyway, these Roman deities embodied the same archetype energies, but they now carried imperial authority and civic identity in ancient Roman culture. Moving on a little bit, I just want to talk about how the Romans did popularize astrology as their political tool. So in ancient Rome, astrology wasn't just mythical, it was very strategic. So emperors used it to legitimize their rule. They used it to forecast military campaigns. They also used it to align themselves with divine fate. And a few examples here is Augustus claimed that his birth sign Capricorn was a symbol of order and restoration. So giving him that rule. Astrology was both consulted and feared. So another example here is Emperor Tiberius. He kept personal astrologers by his side and also banned others that predicted downfalls. And essentially that was kind of all of them, really. Ancient Roman emperors did that. They just wanted it in their favor. Who doesn't?
I know, right?
Who doesn't?
They were a little delusional about it.
Yes. Oh, man. But astrology became basically, essentially, for the ancient Romans, a language of power. It was embedded in their propaganda, in their leadership, and public rituals. And it was also really embedded a lot in their literature and scholarly contributions. But two major Roman authors that helped cement astrology into that, Latin intellectual world as it went to pursue going later was Manilius. And he was a poetic astrologer. He wrote the work of the Astronomica, and it explored the zodiac and personal fate with grandeur and literature flourish. Then you also had, I might butcher this name, so forgive me, Firmicus Maternus. I don't know, it sounds cool, so I'm going to rock with it. But he was also a Roman senator turned astrologer, and he wrote the Methisos Libri VIII, one of the most comprehensive astrological manuals for the Roman world. And it really bridged the celestial influence into Roman values. So it was very, very heavily influenced in their daily life as well as their political life.
Exactly.
Super, super fascinating, super cool, which might be done today, but in the DL.
Literally. I mean, we're doing a little bit of both of what they were doing.
Mm-hmm.
Bringing in a poetic or, more digestible way, and then also bringing some facts. Cold stone facts.
I love it. So I just want to briefly say again, these texts helped ensure astrology wasn't just oral tradition, it was preserved, codified, and taught. But we spoke about it in everyday life, but I just want to stress that unlike the hidden temple practices that the Babylonians had or the symbolic decans of Egypt, which Sophie's going to talk about in a moment, Roman astrology became public and pervasive. So the zodiac signs were etched into their temples and their bathhouses and their mosaics, even their coins and their tombs. All right, soldiers wore amulets engraved with their birth signs. Astrology informed marriage, farming, and legal timing, marking auspicious days for both public and personal matters. So again, it's like stressing kind of that combination of the Babylonian and Greek philosophy with the political versus the me, so to speak. So in essence, the Roman Empire mainstreamed astrology, tying one's fate not just to the stars, but to glory and order of the Roman life itself, of Romans' culture. So a fun fact, though, I did want to mention is that in present day, the days of the week, as well as the names of the months that we utilize, all come back to the Roman gods, back to astrology. Yeah. And now we use that today. Might be slightly articulated a little bit different, but in almost every Western culture.
I think you went in really well when talking about how they were able to spread, the information that they got from the Greeks, and then also what the Greeks got from the Babylonians, and seeing how the progression of the spread of astrology.
Yeah, continue that timeline we were talking about. But I'm excited for this next segment of what you have to tell our stargazers about ancient Egypt.
Yes, let's dive into ancient Egypt. The cosmos wasn't a place of cold calculations. It was a living temple infused with symbolism, cycles, and sacred time. Unlike the more mathematical and predictive approach of Babylonian astrology, the Egyptians viewed celestial events as divine rhythms that echoed through myth, architecture, and ritual life. This segment explores the profound ways the Egyptians used the stars to anchor religion, kingship, and cosmic order, shaping their own form of astrology that would later blend with the Greek thought. The 36 decans, the sacred markers of time and magic. Egyptian star watchers divided the sky into 36 decans, small star groups that rose just before dawn in 10-day intervals. These were used to mark hours of the night, track seasonal progression, and perform magical and healing rituals. Each decan was believed to carry spiritual energies and protective qualities, and they were frequently invoked in amulets and temple inscriptions. The decans formed the foundation for Egyptian astrology, offering a unique system for timing life events, dream interpretations, and temple ceremonies. Now let's look at the timeline for the creation of the decans. For the earliest use, evidence of the decans date back to the pyramid texts of the 5th and 6th dynasties, where celestial references and timing systems are inscribed in royal tombs. Now we move on to the Middle Kingship. More refined decanal lists appeared in coffin texts and astronomical ceilings, showing their inscriptions into funerary and religious practices. The New Kingdom. The Deccan became more systemized, appearing in star clocks painted inside tombs, particularly in the Valley of the Kings. These were used to track time during the night. Lastly, the Ptolemaic period. Under Greek rule, the Egyptian decans were integrated with Greek zodiac signs, especially in the Dendra zodiac, where Hellenistic and Egyptian systems merge. We can look at the temples that align to the heavens. Egyptian temples were designed with astronomical precision. Many aligned to key celestial events like solstices, equinoxes, and the rising of specific stars. The Temple of Karnak aligns with the rising sun at the summer solstice. The Temple of Dendra features the famous zodiac ceiling, blending Greek zodiac signs with Egyptian decans and gods. Temples weren't just places of worship, they were living calendars, physically built to honor and reflect the order of the cosmos.
Kind of reminds me of the ziggurats.
Oh, yeah, the ziggurats.
The Babylonians. Oh, actually, you had something you wanted to say. Remember with the fire and the cuneiform? You told me to remind you when we got to Egypt.
I did. And I when you mentioned of the fires, I thought about the one that happened in the Alexandria Library.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Or probably. Oh,
do you think that was the one?
Maybe.
Ooh.
Oh, so that's how they were able. Oh. That makes so much sense because with that, they were able to bring back astrology during the medieval times, and that was that midpoint from the early beginning, from the medieval ages where astrology was reintroduced to now modern astrology.
Oh, look at that. Yes.
Wow.
So that's probably what it was.
That's what it was.
Look at that. And I was just like doing it off of like, I was like, I think, don't quote me.
That's cool. I feel like we're like little detectives.
Oh,
solving mysteries together.
Of the cosmos.
Of the cosmos,
Mysteries
right.
of the cosmos.
Mysteries of the cosmos.
Yes. Oh, wow. Love it.
Yeah. And I also hinted you guys at some more history, but we'll get into that later. Now we just focus on ancient astrology, okay? All right, so let's look at the comparisons with Babylonian and Greek systems. Babylonians focused on predictive omens and planetary tracking. Their astrology was highly mathematical and state-centered. Egyptians, in contrast, centered their astrology on symbolism, divinity, and sacred cycles which tied to the land and afterlife, which is a huge part of ancient Egyptian culture. Okay? Their whole thing, when you look at it, well, I wouldn't say their whole thing because that's kind of rude. Well, yeah. It wasn't their whole thing, but a big part of their thing was
those big giant pyramids
exactly
for that,
with the tombs, the mummified bodies,
their retainers,
the inscriptions inside of the tombs featuring the zodiac symbols and trackings. All right, all interesting stuff here.
Kind of reminds me of what I just said with the Romans too, putting it in their tombs. So maybe that was a carryover from all of the cultural melding that was happening during that time through the centuries.
Definitely. And while Babylon gave us the zodiac wheel, Egypt gave us the concept of divine timing, seasonal renewal, and celestial magic. Later, the Greeks merged Egyptian decanic symbolism with Babylonian planetary systems to develop a more personalized and spiritual astrology. All right, so hopefully all of this information has piqued your interest even further into astrology, as so much of the ancient world has, blended, or I should say, come into our current
yeah, well,
day-to-day life.
I guess it's like they say, history
the months
repeats itself.
Well, we hope...
Say in a positive way.
Yeah, I was going to say in a more positive way.
No, it's just because it's always with us.
Yeah.
You know?
And I don't want to sound redundant, but I think that, it is powerful in some way, and it gives astrology some weight, when it comes to looking at these things and trying to express to others why so many people are now interested in astrology, pseudoscience.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And hey, every pseudoscience became a real science.
We might be on the brink of something here. But we do have some stellar homework for you guys. We are about to wrap up this episode, and we want to encourage you to continue with some soul homework.
Yes.
We would love for you guys to share with us which ancient cultural astrology intrigued you the most.
Well, we just want to say we sincerely hope you enjoyed this special episode describing a brief evolutionary timeline on the zodiac and astrology. So, whether you're new to astrology or starting your journey by riding this cosmic wave with us, we sincerely hope you learned something new and fun today.
Our next episode is going to explore a deep dive into the sun, moon, and rising signs, which make up part of your big six. Please do not forget to hit subscribe to whichever podcast platform you are listening to us on. That way, you are the first to listen when we release our episodes every Wednesday and Saturday.
Also, follow our socials. The direct links are available in the description section and on our website.
Yes, that means follow us on Instagram, TikTok, X, YouTube, everywhere, okay? Yes. We even have a Facebook page, and we post really insightful and cool stuff throughout the week. Anytime that there are some interesting moon cycles and phases going on, we definitely try to shout it out. We do funny polls and things like that.
Sharing some of our astro journal quotes with you all. So it's a fun community. We just want to engage with everybody and have a good time.
Yeah. And we also want to hear your thoughts on our podcast so far. If you have any questions regarding anything that you've listened to hear and any topics that you would like to hear in future episodes, please drop a comment or message us. And don't forget to share this with someone who may be curious about astrology. Also, don't forget your soul homework.
Yes, I definitely agree with all of that, Sophie. So everyone, like Sophie just said, don't forget your soul homework. We're very interested to hear your thoughts, and we love hearing from you. So with that, we want to remind you all to keep reaching for the stars and trusting the vibes. Until next time, stargazers.